Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. I'm Lisa Cinsulo, the Executive Vice President of Global Operations at GBTA. We'd like to welcome you today to the Win It in 45 webinar series. Win It wherever you stand, job seeker and job holder. Couple of housekeeping notes, if you don't mind. We are recording this session, so you will get a copy of it afterward. We will be sending out a survey at the end of the session, and we'd love it if you would fill it out so that we can continue to provide you with content and speakers that are important to you. Also, if you have any questions, we'd like you to put them in the chat box, and both Nick and Kelly will do their best to get those questions answered for you. And lastly, if you're not already on mute, if you could put yourself on mute or I can mute you, that would be terrific. So a quick recap of today, we'll have job seekers and job holders and how to effectively network in your current environment, the importance of your pitch and actionable advice to get a job for job seekers and for job holders, how to remain relevant, continue to add value, and always pay it forward to your colleagues. So with that, I will hand it over to Michelle McLee, Managing Director, Corporate Services at BNY Mellon. Off to you, Mick.
Thank you so much, Lisa. Thanks, everyone, and welcome. And yes, I am the one driving, which is why we started at the end. But I'm so thrilled to see everyone and to know so many of you that have joined us for today. I have been both a buyer and a supplier for over 30 years, and I've done a lot of interviewing. And it was an interesting situation where I found myself in a job interview for the first time in 2017. I hadn't interviewed for a job since 1999. And I know, Kate Shanley, that was about the time that you were born. But I'm so excited with the fact that so many of you guys have gotten together to have this conversation with us. I am grateful because someone called me out of the blue in 2018 that got me the job that I'm in today. And my goal since then has been to pay it forward with others. What I have found, and I believe in myself having been on both sides, is that we're all a moment away from shifting to the other role. So I'm really happy for the time that we have spent together. When I was putting this together, and I thank you for those of you who have rejoined when we were originally planning on doing this in May, I thought of wanting to partner with someone who cares as much about this industry as I do, and also someone I happen to think is absolutely one of the coolest people on the planet. So with that, my partner, Kelly.
Thank you, dear friend. And as everyone who knows Mick knows, when she asks, you just say yes, and then you go figure it out afterwards, right? And in fact, that's a bit about sort of my history in this industry as well. 30 plus years, lots of executive roles, but I started in 1989. Many of you on the phone were not even born yet, I'm certain. And I started in an individual contributor communications job. And the message to this for me has always been say yes, and then figure it out. And I am now diversifying my role as going from my full-time role to my advisory role with CWT. I'm both a job holder and a job seeker as I'm looking for non-executive director opportunities. So it's an interesting dynamic for me personally as well. And that is, we all have to be uncomfortable. The world is uncomfortable, industry is uncomfortable. If we can get comfortable being uncomfortable, oh my goodness, eyes wide open, that's where the best learning happens. And then the last thing I'll say for us to think about as we talk today, when I decided to make the change last year, realized, oh my goodness, I don't have a resume, a CV. I hadn't had one in 30 years. So the moral to the story is, even if you're as happy as you could possibly be in your current role, never, ever let your CV or your resume get stale, because it's your calling card. It's your opportunity for entry kind of thing. So I'll turn it back to you, Mick, and we'll jump into the content.
Sounds great. I want to just make a suggestion for just about 15 seconds. We've got about 60 people on the call, and it's been growing over the last minute or so. I would like to suggest that everyone first pause for a moment, except for the person that's walking. Continue walking for us. I love the fact that you joined us on a walk. But take a deep breath and pause for a moment. You've joined this time because you want to give something to yourself. The way for you to get the most out of our 40 minutes together is to engage and be focused. When it's possible, turn the phone off. If it's not, put it on mute, but put it to the side so you're only looking at it when it's something that's really critical. But do this for yourself, whether you're a job seeker or a job holder. We want to ensure this is time well spent, and we want to make sure that you are completely present in our conversation. Now, you're going to see me look down because I'm driving here, and I'm going to be looking at the chat box. You're going to see me looking at my phone to chat with Kelly and make sure we're on the same page in my notes. I'm fully engaged and present here. I just wanted to let you know when you see me looking around. So with that, and again, welcome to everyone who's joined us a few minutes late. If everyone could go to the chat box, because that's a way for us to engage. Go to the chat box right now and say hi, where and where you're from. Let's get used to using this chat box so it's a constant communication between us as we go forward. There's nothing worse than joining a call and being talked at. We certainly don't want to do that. I want to thank again the people from May 6th, where we had to make a cancellation, who have rejoined us and have been in contact with me since that time. The way that we've organized this conversation is we're starting with the survey results for those who registered early. We sent a survey for those who did, and we have your top 10. So we're going to ask you to vote on what on your top 10 you want us to cover, and that's what we're going to talk about. So if you did get the email from me last night, pull it up so you can take a read of the top 10 as I'm talking. I will put it up on the screen, but it will be a quick screenshot so that you'll be able to vote in the chat box. Hi, Mike Daly. It's so great to see all these names and familiar faces. We are going to stop sharing the screen shortly and have an open conversation. So if you choose to go on camera, you are certainly welcome to do so. Okay. We wanted to talk about who is on this call today. We've got over 60% job seekers. We expected to have a higher amount for job seekers, and I wanted to thank the hiring managers who joined us. And we have a lot of fabulous links that we're going to be sharing at the end of this. We've got both the drawing for those who are out of work, and we've got over 100 jobs that we're going to share with you. So please stay tuned. There is also a lot of talent on this call. Kelly and I are not here together because we think we have all the answers. We know that we don't, although she has far more than I do. But we want this to be an engaging conversation. So please comment in the chat box and point out things that you've learned. If you want to, there are several people that are on this call because, like me, they want to give back to the community. Put that right in the chat box. If you wanted to offer up your services to look at someone's resumes, if you wanted to offer to do mock interviews with someone, if you have a job, put it right in the chat box. We're going to capture everything after this conversation, and we want to make sure that we're all giving back to each other. We've got about a half and half buyer and supplier. This surprised me a little bit. We do have more buyers than I did expect, but I love that we've got a good mix of people here. And I wanted to also recognize that there's a lot of categories, and there's certainly a lot of people from the technology group that have joined us today from a very, very various backgrounds. So here's our first 10. So this is what I emailed you. So if you got the email, there's nothing different on this page. If you're seeing this for the first time, write down or put into the chat box which one is most important to you. So go to the chat box and write seeker and a number. I'm going to put it back up on the screen. And Christina is going to track this for us, and she's going to text us the number one answer, give or take. It's not scientific. But which of these 10 do you want us to spend a bit more time on? Lower level roles still looking, imposter syndrome. If we don't get to imposter syndrome, Hank Benedetti, Beth Knork and I are doing a session at GBTA specifically on imposter syndrome. So certainly stay tuned for that. Is the time I'm spending on my job working? And there's two of those. Two people said that. Questions about headhunters returning calls. Is networking best for job search versus job boards? Does network really matter? Is it really going to get you what you're looking for? Always the bridesmaids, never the bride. Great interviews, no offers. And how do I get a remote job? What skill sets and how to articulate transferable skills? So this is going off screen in a couple more seconds, and then I'm going to get into the two things that really resonated the most with me, and what was mentioned a couple of times here. So let's talk about the two things I'm going to dig into. One is my activity having an impact? Is this the things that I'm doing to get a job time well spent? And networking, does it really work? Okay, So it's a quick exercise. Grab a piece of paper real quick and a pen. The technology folks on the call probably said I don't even have that because they're technology specialists. Small piece of paper will work. Here's what you do. On that, you make a list of things and cut it in half. On one side, you put the tasks and activities that you're doing towards the goal, and use this for anything. I use this example as get a job. So what are those tasks that you do? It might be applying to everything in LinkedIn. I'm looking for volunteer opportunities. I'm chasing the headhunter that has not returned my call, despite the fact that I have asked for, interviewed 4 times for that role. One a day. This is something I do suggest everyone do. And I was out of work for most of 4 years and did this. I reach out to one person in my network every day and attending industry webinars. So here's your activities on one side. On the other side, cite some impactful moments that came from an activity. So maybe you were able to help someone else who's out of work. You were asked to be in a speaking engagement. You actually had a feeling where you were heard. You got a job interview. You joined a volunteer committee. You learned more about the industry, and then you got a second job interview. So once you have this list, here's the activities that towards the goal and some really good feeling, good moments towards it, and then circle and connect all of the activities toward what that moment was. You attended a networking event and you learned more that you're going to use in your interview. The one a day, you know what? You felt heard, and you know you're not alone. There are a lot of people in our industry that are out of work right now. You attended an industry event and you were asked to be part of a speaking engagement. When you finish that exercise, look at what remains. Applying to all openings in LinkedIn in my field. I had easily 3 figures of applied jobs active when I was out of work. And you know what? None of it worked. It did not work. What did work is when I applied for jobs where I had a connection or I found a connection to the company. You're chasing a headhunter who has ghosted you after 4 interviews and you're baffled by this. Understood, but he's just not that into you. Remember that Sex and the City episode for those who saw it? If a headhunter thinks you're the right person for the job and it's the right fit, they will find you, they will get you. Let it go. It's not worth your time. So this exercise really helped me to make sure that I'm spending my energy on the right things. The second thing I wanted to focus on is, does networking really work? And the answer is absolutely it does. So I've got some numbers on the left-hand side of the screen. I posted 6 roles in the first quarter of 2021 and used only LinkedIn. I got over 1,300 applicants in the first 2 weeks alone. I interviewed, along with my team, as many people as we possibly could. And of the people that I interviewed, every single one of them came from my network. They might have had a fantastic resume. We got a lot of fantastic resumes. But when, for example, Kelly called and said, I've got someone that you should take a look at, I did. 60% of those people that I interviewed, 60% were hired that came from my network.
And you know, Mick, that's such a great example, because in this case, that candidate, someone that I tried to hire back in Asia Pacific, wanting to relocate back to Europe, and wasn't sort of the right candidate on paper, right? He didn't look like the perfect fit. However, because Mick trusted me and I trusted her with him, she said, yep, we'll take a look at him. And in fact, she has now hired him. And so it shows how transferable skills are, even if it isn't 100% clear at first glance. And the network works. Otherwise, Mick probably wouldn't have even looked at this candidate if it hadn't been for my referral.
And I will say, and no negative to the person, but because there are so many fantastic resumes and so many great people that are out of work, the one thing that really stood out was the fact that this was someone that came from someone I trusted in the industry. Okay, so with that, I want to just remind you of one thing. There's 43,800 minutes in a month. You deserve to spend 60 of them to foster your network every month. When you look at it that way, it is absolutely time well spent and doable. The time to network is not in a time of crisis. Very important that, and what I do is I've actually blocked 30 minutes every week that just says industry. And during that time, I reach out to someone who is in need I have a list, sadly, of between 40 and 45 people who are out of work that I've been looking for work for. I'm thrilled that a lot of these are getting crossed off, but every day it gets added to it. So it helps you to do something for yourself as well as do something to someone else. Okay, so with that, here is the next grouping for you to vote on. These are the 10 things for job holders that were sent to everyone last night. If everyone can go to the chat box and put holder and the number that you would like to cover. My company was acquired. How do I promote myself? How do I get promoted now and grow into the role? Maximize the impact of presentations. Demonstrate value when surrounded by extroverts who dominate discussions. And that came from more than one person. How to teach leaders to be more inclusive when opinions differ. We're losing people in the industry. How do we retain them? Differentiate yourself from other leaders. Stay relevant in current role. Best articulate value and create opportunities where I am today and help colleagues in the industry who are out of work. So I'm going to hand it over to Kelly in a moment. And this is your last few seconds while this is on the screen. Vote in the chat which of these 10 you would like to hear from us most. And Kelly, over to you.
Yeah, and I've been watching the chat. They're flying in at the speed of light, and it looks like every number has been picked. So I'm going to cover a couple, right? A few things for us to focus on. And I saw this in the chat, networking. And is it a two-way street? Yes, it is. Giving and taking, offering help as much as you're asking for help. And the power of mentors, sponsors, and advocates. This, I hope that we've all had really important people in our lives that we looked up to in our careers, right? Mentors who helped show us the way. Reach back out to them. Sponsors or advocates are folks who, will speak on your behalf, say great things about you. And that again goes both ways. You also want to advocate for others. Learning how to advocate for yourself. And no offense to our gentlemen colleagues on the call, but men, this is a proven fact, are much better at advocating for themselves than women are. Women often don't think that I'm necessarily qualified. I need to meet 100% of the criteria to be eligible, when in fact, absolutely not. And then redefine what career progression looks like. I've been talking to lots of folks about this. Often a lateral move is as important or more important than a promotion, because a lateral move into a new part of the company, a new part of the organization, into a different department will be growth, will be learning, and at some point in the future will show depth and breadth of your experience. Also, influencing without direct accountability. Oh my goodness. This is all of our opportunity for our industry, for our companies, for each other, to make sure that we are accepting responsibility to drive that discussion around inclusion, to create an atmosphere where everyone feels safe and has a voice. And then there's been a lot of comments about how do we take our travel industry related resume and make it more open to other industries and I was going to suggest this as well. It's a small investment to hire a professional to help you do this. I did. Last fall, when I started looking for non-exec roles, I hired someone because it was overwhelming. I was a bit paralyzed because it was just too much, right? And so I really wanted to make sure that my documents captured the unique things about me. And that's what I would say to you. There's a lot of stuff that's going to be the same. You want your resume to be the things that are unique about you. So let me dig into a couple of quick items that I think are probably most relevant. On this next slide, you'll see that my thinking around redefining career progression, and honestly, that's what I'm doing right now. I never honestly, a year ago, would not have thought that I would be at this place in my career. But this point about lateral moves, imagine how exciting it would be to learn something new. I'm doing that in some consulting I'm doing for another company completely outside of the travel sector. What they wanted was my commercial expertise. It's super relevant and transferable. You can also give back and volunteer for projects within your company that are outside of your area of expertise. Raise your hand. Ask for opportunity to be part of other things that maybe have not been part of your area of responsibility so far. And then, as I mentioned earlier, you can add value even if you're not 100% qualified. And I promise you, every step of the way in every job I've had over 30 years, I had no idea what I was doing. I was being asked to take on responsibilities that were completely outside of my comfort zone. I said yes, and then I surrounded myself with really smart people who helped me find the way. A lot of listening and a lot of learning. So if you see an opportunity within your company, outside of your company, a volunteer opportunity to broaden your skill set, to learn something new, to give back, I promise you will add value, and it will keep expanding your network as well.
Thank you, Kel.
Nick?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So here's what I would like to suggest that we do. We've got a couple of the finalists, the remote working for the, how do you get a job? If what skill set are you needing to convey if you're looking to get a job in a remote environment? That was one of the top ones for the job seeker. And so let's do this. Let's remove the spotlights, Lisa. Let's just have the conversation, and we'll start with this one. So as far as remote working is concerned, it's one of the things that I think we've got to be there's a fine line, and you have to be very careful based on which job you're looking at. There have been times when I've had a job that has absolutely required 5 days a week in the office. And if it's an on-site coordinator for food services, of course, you know that that's not one that's going to be flexible. However, there are some jobs where I've said on-site is preferred, and I found the right person, and I was able to be flexible and change it based on having the right person, the right fit. What I would caution is to go for roles that you think that you're the right fit, where you think there may be flexibility, even if it's not stated. Sell them on you 100% so that they understand who you are, and that remote working isn't the first thing that you're talking about. Sell them on who you are, what you can do. And with the question of how can you illustrate the mindset and the skill set, leverage the successes you've already had. So for example, I work for my manager who's in London, who I speak to about once every few weeks, and I see about twice a year. That's someone who absolutely could be a successful candidate in a remote environment. I would suggest that you pepper that through your conversations without using the word remote, right? Illustrate organically how you work independently, how you deliver, how you are both an individual contributor and able to foster the culture of your organization, your direct and your broader organization, in what you do every day now. Get them to really want you for their role. And in the final conversations is when you start talking about compensation and remote environment and where there could be some flexibility. So that's my recommendation. If it is a role where there seems like it could be some flexibility for you to be able to work remotely. If it's a role that does say it's a remote role, I'd love to throw it over to you, Kelly. So if it's a stated remote role, what are some of the things that you'd be looking for in someone to be able to say that they're the right person for this role?
Well, and Mick, I will add, if your first interview with either the search headhunter person and or the hiring person happens to be virtual, imagine this is your first opportunity, your first impression to show how good you are as a communicator. Because what I would look for, and what we're all looking for, as everybody moved home at the beginning of the pandemic, and now we're all sort of in a state of everyone's trying to figure out how much remote work, how much virtual, all of it. It's all about effective communication. How effective can you be, especially if it's a leadership position? How effective can you be as a leader, engaging your team, creating an inclusive environment if you're doing it virtually? So think about how you can do that. If you're an individual contributor and you're going to be part of a team, again, how are you going to actively participate in that team's success if you are virtual? You have to demonstrate this in the interviewing process. So when it comes time to talk about, well, where am I going to be based and compensation and the rest of it, they already are in love with you. They can't live without you, because then there's always a bit more flexibility. So if it's not stated or even, have them fall in love with you. And then it will be all about how to make it work together rather than the things that separate you. You end up talking more about the things that are common. So we all now want to use this technology we're using today. Imagine we wouldn't be able to have this meeting today, this session today, if we weren't effectively using technology, communication tools like Zoom, right? So make sure that you are an effective communicator. Little things, guys, like look into the camera. Folks always tell me, Kelly, it's like you're in the room with me. Get out of my living room. And it's because I look into the camera all the time. Mm-hmm. Now, that sometimes means that I have to make it up as I go. And sometimes I have notes, but it really is important to look into the camera if you're doing things more virtually. So it's about selling yourself and your brand and what you stand for. The last thing I'll say is a hiring manager or a recruiter. Number one, by the way, don't forget, recruiters, headhunters don't get paid until they place someone, right? So you want to make their job easy. All the things that are so fantastic about you, you want them to be highlighting that to the hiring person, right? And then in the end, you just have to make sure they can't live without you. And then the rest of the conversation gets so much easier.
And that's also why anytime I'm managing an event like this, I say at the very beginning, when I look down, because it is something that people do notice and it is something that matters. All right, let's go to the second vote, which is for holders. And this also came from the chat box as well. Be specific about how to advocate for yourself and articulate your value in opportunities where you are today. What's a couple of things that comes to mind for you, Kel?
Well, I think that, our first impression is to always talk about results, right? Okay, well, what did I deliver? And although that's important, I think that companies and teams right now are financial results and performance is an outcome. Right now, our industry and many industries really need to be focused about how are we going to bring talent in and how are we going to develop and retain talent. And so focusing on the how and the why is as important as the what. So you are going to add value in lots of ways. Of course, you're going to deliver on the things that you're accountable for. But what about how you influence others? What about how you show up? What about the values of your company and how you demonstrate those values? That's what engagement is all about. That's where discretionary effort, as I like to say, that's the secret sauce, the magic, right? That's where a company, again, is going to constantly be coming to you when there's a problem to solve, a challenge to be overcome, and or an opportunity that they need their best. They need to know what they can count on you for. And that's when you'll get tapped on the shoulder for lots of additional opportunities that are outside of your current role or promotions. Make sure that your boss and those around you know what they can trust you for. What can they count on you for?
One of the ways that I've found to be able to do that, and I welcome the person, I won't call you out in case you don't want to speak, but the person that asked for specific examples of how to advocate for yourself, I welcome you to put your hand up if you'd like to ask a follow-up. One of the things that I found, which might seem counterintuitive, but it's volunteering for things that are outside of your space. So for example, if you are on a team and your specialty is in marketing, and there is a project that comes up where they're developing a subcommittee in finance in order to address something, put your hand up for that role to be part of that so that people can see you outside of a single box. No, none of us is one-dimensional. And it's up to us to teach others how you want to be treated and how you want to be seen. The way to do that is to put yourself in circumstances that are a bit different than where you're currently seen. And it might be a stretch for you, as Kelly said earlier, and as I've often said too, get comfortable being uncomfortable. Because if you're comfortable, it means that you're not stretching yourself or not necessarily learning or growing.
That's exactly right. Mick, seriously, I wouldn't be, as I told Mick, I'm standing here at my desk. I wouldn't be standing here today living in London, my most fabulous place to live ever in my career. And I wouldn't have had the opportunities to live in Paris and in Singapore and in Washington and Chicago. I would not have had any of these opportunities if my bosses and other leaders around me didn't know that I was willing to try and that I was going to be okay being uncomfortable, even if I didn't know what I was doing, that they could count on me no matter what. That's what you need to do to advocate for yourself. And don't forget, you don't have to meet all the criteria. You don't have to be the perfect fit. I think that most successful leaders and even individual contributors in roles weren't the perfect fit, because what they showed in interest and in desire and in effort far outweighed specific technical expertise.
I think that's exactly right. Any questions, put your hand up if you'd like to ask a question live. I'm going to go to one other item that was on what was submitted to us in advance. And we're getting some really great conversations that are happening in the chat, which again, we'll capture later. So using the chat thing, if you click on reactions, you can raise your hand. I'll keep watching for that. And let me go to one other thing that had come forward as one of the top things for holders. Just very briefly, Kel, how can we teach leaders to be more inclusive when opinions differ? This is something that I celebrate within my team. And one of the things that I do is I will tell my team that from day one, and anyone that's on, because I manage the mailroom and I manage the corporate aircraft. So if you can imagine the size and scope between what we're doing is quite vast. And what I say is, no matter who you are, and Kate Shanley and I have worked together when she was interning, and I said the same thing to her, and she's had amazing ideas in marketing and social media. You're here because you have a voice. Doesn't matter what your role is, and you put your business card at the door, always have a voice. And my team will disagree with me and will tell me when I've made a mistake. Now, thankfully, if we're on a big call like this, Christina will send me a text saying you just said something that was completely wrong or didn't make sense. If it's just the team, then as others will know, they'll say, listen, hold on a second, let's go back to this. So encouraging diversity in thought leadership and making sure that you're corrected absolutely is important. But how would you do it for leaders that aren't open to that?
Well, and this is such an important topic. I mean, everybody knows there's so much reading now, right? And so much research on diversity, equity, and inclusion. And in fact, I wrote a few blogs recently about this, that each of those three things are unique: diversity, equity, and inclusion. In fact, so many people, leaders, sort of lump, oh, well, I have equal men and women, or I have multiple cultures covered, or age, or whatever the category is. So I have a diverse team, therefore I'm inclusive. Absolutely not. In fact, unless everyone at the table has a voice, it is not an inclusive environment. And in fact, for some, may feel unfair or unsafe, right? So first lesson for a leader is to make it clear to your team and in your team dynamic that not only is it okay to have a voice, but that you expect everyone to have a voice. And that part of the role of your team is for everyone to have a voice and everyone to have an opinion. And in fact, you're expecting them to question. If you're not questioning, you're not learning, you're not growing, and we're not getting better each and every day. And so one, you need to make that an expectation of the individuals on your team, as well as part of the team dynamic. If you have a combination of introverts and extroverts, which I have had many times, now imagine, right? A team of sales leaders, they're all extroverts. In fact, they're not all extroverts. Some of them historically were trained extroverts because they learned how to speak up and to be in a room of extroverts, even if their comfort zone was being an introvert. Your job as a leader, or as a teammate for that matter, is to make sure those on the team that may be introverted are called upon, are asked for their opinion, because it may not be in their nature to speak up. And sometimes then the opportunity passes by. And so whether you are the leader or you are a teammate, it's our shared responsibility to create an environment where everyone has a voice. And it is those experiences that are unique to each of us that create the most dynamic opportunity for learning and growth and the best ideas. This is where the best ideas come from, where the best problem solving comes from. And the bottom line is, our industry has lots of challenges and problems right now, right? So we need the best minds and the most unique voices to help us solve them. So the last thing you may have noticed on my early slide at the very beginning, one of the biggest gifts you can give to your boss, to a teammate, or to someone that works for you is feedback. Everyone needs to get comfortable giving and receiving feedback. When someone gives you feedback, the only response is thank you. Not to defend your position, not to fight back, all of those things. The best gift we can give and receive is feedback. It's often much harder for the person giving the feedback than it is to receive it, right? So feedback is a way to create an inclusive environment. It's the right place, in my opinion, to begin to create that inclusion. And last thing I'll say, even more important when everyone's working virtually or not everyone is together. Imagine if you've got some of your team together and then other members of the team are remote. They may feel excluded. So we all have to work really hard at making sure everyone is included. Do not take it for granted. It has to be intentional.
Agree.
I could talk about the topic all day, sorry.
I'm with you. I'm seriously, I'm with you. I also look at this as complaints as well. Beneath every complaint is a request. And the beneath every feedback is gratitude because of where it comes from. Okay. I haven't been watching hands. I think so we've got David and we've got Marcy. David, if you could go ahead and take yourself off mute.
Hi, Mick and Kelly. Great. Thanks for this opportunity. Great to see some industry friends on here. So that's very nice and great conversation. We are in the middle of the great resignation amongst the United States because of COVID and corporate strategy. As a global head of events for financial firms for 20 years and starting my own business, Make It Happen Management, people talk about how job descriptions are so specific, but yet the strategy of industries are changing. So people have talked about how to promote yourself in the chat. What is your advice on job descriptions that may say for a managing director or for a VP, and then the job descriptions and the specs? What if it's the job description is below your expectations or above your expectations? How do you best sell yourself? And do you suggest applying for those roles that you may not be out of or below because of the negotiations at the end that Mick was talking about?
I think that it's a great question. If you go back to the surveys, it was one of the first items that people had mentioned is about taking a job that's lower than what you were expecting. And while each person makes their own decisions based on where they are personally, I'll give you a personal example. When I was looking for a role, I was offered a job at a college, which was limited to travel. And travel's always my heart, but I've also done other things in addition to the travel industry. I turned down that role because I felt that it would put me into one specific area, which would not allow me to grow based on the research I had done of the broader department. There are times when you need to take the role that is going to be a little bit of a step backwards. But the thing I think is really important is that sometimes the path is not always straight. And sometimes we've got to go sideways, and sometimes we even take a step back in order to get to where we want to go. I think that one of the things that has really become a mantra to me overall is when you're looking at these circumstances, look instead of what happened to you as what's happened for you. What's the reason this job has come in front of me? What's the reason that this is the job where I've gotten the interviews? And make your decision based on where you think you can take it. based on the hiring manager and who's the person that you would be responsible and reporting to, and what flexibility have they shown to being open to expanding to other areas. So for example, and if you don't mind, David, I'm just going to say this real quick, and then we're going to go right over to Marcy. We'll have one final question before we close. When I met you first, you might have been talking to me about a role that I was looking for in a temporary project manager role that we ended up working together on. But because of the conversation, I knew that you could do, well, actually my job and several other things. So when I talk to you, I might only have this role that's open, and I brought you into that role. But how much time did you spend on the role I brought you into versus the entire strategic plan that we end up working on? So keep in mind that the hiring manager can only give you what's in front of them and what's improved. What they want to talk to you about is something that could be quite broad to that. They might see you in the same way and give it the chance that they might not officially be able to say when they're bringing you in. Make sense?
Yes,
Yeah.
it does. And I think
Okay.
LinkedIn doesn't allow for that connection. They basically see your experience and say you're overqualified.
And you're absolutely right. It's up to us to find that. And I'm mindful of time, so I'm going to do this if I can. I'd like to go forward in our conversation so that we officially close on time. And I'm going to offer, Kelly and myself will stay after we officially close the recording of this conversation to speak to whoever wishes to remain on a bit longer. This is an offer that we have for all people who are looking for a job. Send me your name and phone number. Again, everyone has my email from the email I sent to you last night. I'll put all the names in the drawing today and offer a free consultation for those who are out of work. We have over 100 jobs. This link is going to be sent to you immediately following, along with the survey of this experience and webinar, so that we can help those who are out of work to find other jobs. So with that, we're going to just give you about 10 or 15 seconds of closing on this. Let me get it over to you, Cal.
Sure. I think, again, we started the conversation here in that your network is your most valuable asset. These are the folks who are going to say the best things about you, right? And they're going to maybe make a connection, David, to a hiring manager that you might not have access to on your own directly, right? And so your network is your most valuable asset. Don't wait to nurture that network when you're in a crisis, as Mick said earlier. Even if you love where you are, keep working that network, because you never know who you're gonna meet and what influence you can have. It is a two-way street, giving and receiving. Discomfort is a way of life now. So let's all get comfortable not knowing everything and being uncomfortable. And then you see that photo right there. That is my 91-year-old father, who I'm going to see for the first time in a year, in a couple of weeks. And he says, always, there's a reason that your rear view mirror is small and the windshield is big. There is no point in looking backwards, only forward. And it is the best, especially when you're uncertain, especially when things don't make sense, when you're afraid. It's the best advice. I promise you, my father would not lead any of us astray. Mick?
Thank you. And I wanted to close with two things. One of them is that, and I'm sure many of you have heard of this, about you can't control what's happening to you, but certainly you can control how you respond. I wanted to also make sure that I reminded you, because again, I've been in your place, for job seekers, try to be on your own side today. Think about how often you will stand up for someone else or speak to your friend in a way that you won't even speak to yourself that way. It is a very, very difficult time to be out of work. And one of the questions that was asked earlier that I really think is important to close with is, when you're out of work and you're looking to connect with someone, how do you find a reason to connect when there isn't a reason to connect? And one of the ways of doing that that works for me, when someone contacts me and says, hey, I attended your webinar, can you give me a few minutes of your time? I'd like to get some help on that. It might be, I saw your post where you had mentioned that your friend Kelly, I'm looking for a job at CWT, can you help me to navigate the waters? Find something specific. And with social media nowadays, it's a lot easier to do. Find something specific and a reason to connect, and be very specific with your ask. Not just a, hey, I'd like to grab coffee sometime. We all get a lot of those. But if you say to me, I've got an interview in 2 weeks' time, at CWT, Kelly is your friend. Help me to figure this out. I'm going to respond to that to the best of my ability. Different with HUD hunters, and HUD hunters, and again, I'm not saying this in a negative way about them. They have a job to do, and that's to make money by connecting people in the best way possible. When you're talking to someone like myself or Kelly or someone else, a colleague in the industry, the only thing I can say is don't give up. If I've missed your email, send it to me again, because I do everything possible to be able to respond to everyone in the best way that I can. So with that, on behalf of Lisa and Kelly and myself, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate your time. For those of you who would like to stay on, we're going to stop the recording now, but everyone is welcome to stay on for another 10 minutes with us. Lisa, anything else before we